start talking about some things. So yeah, anyway, the first thing that we're going to be doing is going through and just kind of like showing the models on the site, since this is the first NBA stream that I'm doing. Those of you who are not part of the Paydirt community, I have a site called paydirt.ghost.io. I provide fantasy stats and sports and stuff like that, models and everything like that you could possibly need for DFS and for betting. So we're just going to like go there, and we're going to go take a look at the models really quick and show those off really quick, and then we're going to jump into the models for tonight and talk about the actual DFS slate. So if you go to the site and you go to NBA, there is like the regular NBA page, which is going to have all of the model links here, and then there's going to be a breakdown of the models that I utilize. You can go here and you can go watch this video on the page. It is free to watch. One of the tools that I just built is an NBA historical ranges tool, so you're going to be able to look at players and take a look at how they have been over the course of the season for either DraftKings or FanDuel. Down here, you're going to be able to see the percent chance that they end up in a certain range for things. So like Joel Embiid has a 35% chance to have between 3.03 and 3.04 assists on a night. His fantasy stats are like spread out pretty wide. If you just want to look at any individually, you can double click on them and then you can auto scale it. So you can kind of see what their actual full range of outcomes is going to be individually. You can remove fantasy and you can just look at the counting stats. You can see where those go. Like if you look at somebody like, we'll say Nikola Jokic, then you can look at, just remove fantasy and then auto scale this. You can see that like his rebounds and his assists overlap pretty well, so he's going to have quite a bit of both of those things. His points are where he really unlocks his upside. If you look at somebody like Ben Simmons, he is similar in the way that he gains his fantasy points. He actually is very, very clustered in all of his ways, so he has a lot of different ways to get fantasy points. That's the kind of thing that we want to look at. If you look at somebody like Danny Green, on the other hand, somebody who is super volatile, you can see that the vast majority of his points are going to actually come from scoring, whereas he barely gets any points or assists at all, you know, the 2 and the 1.5 to 3 range. So this is a cool tool. You can look up individual players. You can compare two players against each other. Like, say you want to compare Seth Curry and Danny Green in their points on the year. You can see that Seth Curry obviously has a lot more points. You can see that his range of outcomes is much higher than that of Danny Green. You can compare their DraftKings fantasy points and see that they're actually like not that much farther away from each other. There is a bit of a difference in the mean, but you can see that like the ranges are not drastically different from each other. If you auto scale them, they're a little bit more different, but the ceilings and the medians are not that much different. And then you can also go over into the team comparisons, and you can look at teams overall. And you can see how players have done in terms of like fantasy points, for instance. Giannis is obviously the breadwinner here, but you can isolate guys and see what their fantasy points have been through the season. So like Chris Middleton, you can see that he started out super hot and then has dropped down quite a bit. Drew Holiday, you can see that he has been up and down throughout the entire season. You don't know what you're getting with him. But this is a really cool tool that you can utilize to do some research. Outside of that, though, I just wanted to show that off really quick because I just built that, and like people who are in the community know about that tool, but people who are not in the community don't really know about it. So make sure you're utilizing that when you're doing your research for the night. This is the actual DraftKings model for tonight. So tonight is a 10-gamer. There are a lot of options. There's already been a lot of news regarding the Celtics. So Celtics have 4 players that just went onto a quarantine. I believe that it is Robert Williams, Tristan Thompson, Carson Edwards, and one more other person that I don't remember the name of. But they're pretty thin. So obviously, Daniel Theis is going to be somebody who projects really, really well. In fact, he projects as the best value on the slate. If you don't know what these columns mean, make sure that you go over to the site and you take a look at the video explaining the tools. I talk through all of this stuff pretty at length in that video. But T-Val basically measures how often a player is actually going to reach their GPP score. Daniel Thies at 4,300 reaches his GPP value at 49.77% of the time based on the baselines and based on the simulations that we have. So he represents the best value so far on the slate. There are some questionables for the Lakers. LeBron James is questionable. Anthony Davis is questionable. And Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is questionable, I believe. So that might open up some things. Like, obviously, when we look at projections overall, LeBron James is way up top at 56, just behind James Harden. But him and Anthony Davis are going to be top 10 projections pretty much every single night. If one of them is out, it's going to make it so that the other one gets a pretty massive jump in projections. So that's something to keep in mind when you're building out your lineups. LeBron has had this ankle issue for a while, and he's going to miss a game eventually. It is a back-to-back set, so I am inclined to think that he probably is going to be out tonight. He is still questionable, so I can't really project him as out right now. He's been playing through the questionable tag, as has Anthony Davis. But I think one of them sits tonight, and I think that it's going to be LeBron. If LeBron sits, Anthony Davis is going to get a pretty big jump to his projection. That being said, it's really not that great of a matchup for power forwards and centers. His projection is relatively low at 46.97. Even with the boost of LeBron James being out, I would think that probably boosts him up to maybe 54 or 55. It wouldn't be as big of a boost and as nice of a projection as people would think. If this was a better matchup, then yeah, he'd be projected for somewhere in the 59 to 60 range, but he's priced appropriately for LeBron James sitting, as is LeBron James priced appropriately for Anthony Davis sitting. You're not really getting huge values on either one of them, even if the other one sits. So is it a spot to pay attention to? Absolutely. Is it a spot that I think is slate defining? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. There are other guys in that range that project pretty well and look like they're in pretty good spots. Julius Randle at 9,800. People still aren't playing him, and he's been playing 38 minutes per game or something like that, and his numbers are fantastic. He's putting up Nikola Jokic numbers, and people just don't want to play him. So on a 10-game slate at 9,800, he's projecting at 10% ownership. My guess is that if Anthony Davis ends up being super chalk because of LeBron James being ruled out, that even less people play Julius Randle, right? Because they play the same positions and they're the same price. So people are going to make that 1v1 decision of, do I want to play Anthony Davis or do I want to play Julius Randle? And my guess is that they'll probably choose Anthony Davis if we get the LeBron James news. So keep that in mind. Pay attention to that situation. Let's take a look kind of really quick at who represents the best values here. And if you guys have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I'm just kind of spitballing on this. This is my first NBA stream of the year. I don't really know what my full schedule is going to be on this. Usually, those of you who have been watching my NFL streams know that I will usually go over the Vegas information first, and then I'll look game by game, and I'll break down the players that matter in each game. Maybe we do that again with NBA. Maybe instead what we're going to do is we're going to go with the overall tab, and then we'll look at the price-specific stuff. Eventually, I should work in some Vegas stuff. Actually, let's go take a look at Vegas really quick. Oh. And for those that don't know, I usually use Fantasy Labs NBA Vegas tab, and their Vegas tabs are just really good for every sport. So let's sort this by implied live. And actually, let's just look at over-unders overall. So this Washington Celtics game is the highest over-under at 236.5. That makes sense. 66% of the money has come in on the over. It has been bet up a bit. It opened at 235. So 236.5 is pretty high total. Both teams are over the implied total of 110, which is something that I kind of look at for a cutoff. It's something that I care a bit about. So both teams over that threshold of 110. Celtics at 120.5. That seems like it's probably the highest on the slate. Yeah, people think that the Wizards. I think that somebody in the in the Discord the other day said that the Wizards were like the cores of NBA DFS, and like, no, they're a good matchup. I think they're a good matchup anyway. Let's go take a look at what their overall allowed is. And this defensive matchups tool is free if you have not seen it on the site. So go to overall efficiency allowed. Washington is a good matchup. 3.31% boost to fantasy points per minute. They're no Minnesota. Minnesota is a way better matchup overall. Chicago is a way better matchup. Charlotte, way better. San Antonio, way better. So Washington is a good matchup. They look like they're giving up the most points above average, but not as many rebounds, assists. They're about league average. So it's really just a points boost for Washington. Should speak well to shooters on the Celtics, but shouldn't necessarily be a huge boost otherwise. But regardless, it's the highest over-under on the slate by a pretty good amount, 236.5. After that, we have the Utah Jazz at 231, and then we have the Utah Jazz and the Milwaukee Bucks at 231. Game's pretty close, 5.5-point spread. Celtics and Lakers, or Celtics and Warriors at 229.5, only a 6.5-point spread. Man, the Clippers look bad this year. 6.5-point spread for them over the Warriors, and then 225 for the Raptors and the Kings, only a 5-point spread. So the biggest spread on this slate is 8.5 for the Lakers against the Bulls. We have a 7.5 for the Suns over the Pistons, but this is the biggest spread. There's really no games that look like they're setting up to be massive blowouts. The game with the lowest over-under is 211.5 with the Thunder against the Knicks. That's a really, really low over-under. Neither team is projected over 110. That being said, that game should be close, right? Like, it's 2.5-point spread. 216 over-under for that Suns-Detroit game where Detroit is only implied to score 104.25. So that's maybe a game that you would probably want to have a little bit less exposure to. Get a little bit of news. Jeff Teague is available to play. Josh Jackson went through shoot-around and is a game-time decision Friday. I think he's probably going to play. He was out yesterday, but he did go through shoot-around. So Josh Jackson should be in. All right, so overall, people are mostly interested in this Washington and Celtics game. I don't think that it's a game that you have to game stack. It's not like it has a 240 over-under with every other game being under 230. But it is a game worth focusing on, for sure. So that makes sense. Like, Daniel Theis is looking like the best value so far. Then Zion Williamson looking pretty good at 9% owned. James Harden looking pretty good at 7% owned. Cole Anthony looking pretty good, but 30% owned. So who's going to be the highest owned on the slate? Caris LeVert. I have had some discussions with the community so far today, where Tribe Shabazz, who's in this chat right now, disagrees with my projection on Caris LeVert of 31.89. And that is fine to disagree with that, but understand that his median projection would likely be somewhere between 36 and 40 fantasy points. That's like pretty industry standard right now, I think. And then I go an extra spot forward and apply a defensive adjustment to it as well. So if we go back to this defensive efficiency matchups tool, they are facing Memphis today. So we can go over and we can look at Memphis. We can see where their weaknesses and where their strengths are. And it's a really, really bad matchup for shooting guards and point guards. It's a drop in points. It's only a slight drop to point guards, but it's a serious drop in shooting guards to points, serious drop in rebounds to point guards, while also being a drop to shooting guards. It's a slight boost for assists to point guards, but it's a big drop for shooting guards, big drop in 2-point efficiency. It's a boost actually for 3-point efficiency to shooting guards, but it's a huge drop to point guards. Overall, fantasy points per minute, just really, really bad for guards going up against Memphis, which speaks to the way their defense works. So when you have that, it's me, I'm community. You are community, yeah. I mean, there were some other people that were doubting this projection, and I think that's fine. I keep hitting my mic. I'm so sorry about that. I think that's fine. It's okay to wonder why it's so low. But, like, frankly, LeVert, he kind of runs really, really hot sometimes, but let's not pretend that he hasn't had bad games. He is a shooter, after all. He's good. Yeah. But at 7,400, like, he's kind of priced where his projection should be now, right? In a good matchup yesterday, I had him at like around 42, I think. Or no, it was a relatively bad matchup, but like his baselines were okay. He exceeded them for sure, but it's just one of those things where whenever he is like the main guy, I think that a lot of people just want to like assume that he's gonna have a good game, and we just got to remember that it's not a given. Projection of 32 is relatively low for sure. The LevX hates him. He is the worst LevX on the slate. He's projected to be about 50% owned. I would be surprised if it was not significantly higher than that. I would guess that he would be somewhere in like the 60 to 70% range. This is not a price that is significantly higher than he was yesterday, and he just crushed for the chalk. So I think he probably ends up somewhere between 60 and 70% owned, and hopefully, for my sake, he doesn't do super well, because I'll have 12% of him. I'll have as much as T-Val allows me to have of him, but I'm not going to boost him up. And it seems like I'll probably be taking a pretty big stand on being under on him. So after him, we have Daniel Teese, we have Cole Anthony, and then we have DeAnthony Melton. All those guys projected over 20% owned. Teese and Cole Anthony projected over 30% owned. Whereas both of them have good T-Vals. Daniel Theis is projected to hit his tournament value 50% of the time, whereas Cole Anthony is projected to hit it 40% of the time, and neither one of those guys are a negative LevX. The community is, or the industry is not on them heavy enough. So they're still good plays. They're still a little bit undervalued. DeAnthony Melton a little bit overvalued, but it's kind of negligible within that 10% range. And then Jason Tatum, Joe Harris, Brandon Ingram, and Gary Clark. I think that we just got a little bit of news. Aaron Gordon is also out, it appears. I think based on Fournier, if he's out, then Ross is an upgrade. Oh, so these are just like, this is just like community talking through things. But Cole Anthony looks like an okay play at 5K. Daniel Theis looks like pretty good chalk at 4,300. Jason Tatum, I'm fine with it, 9,200, but there are some pretty good studs to pay for. So maybe I don't want to play the one that is that highly owned. Let's see. I probably won't end up with very much Gary Clark or DeAnthony Melton just because their projections are pretty bad. A projection of 18 and a projection of 15 on a 10-game slate, like, I'm just not really into that. I don't like playing guys that project for less than 20 fantasy points on a slate this large. On like a 5-gamer, I guess I'm okay with it because raw points matter, and having the value to unlock the raw points of the studs really matters. But on a 10-game slate, like, I want upside. You're not going to take down a GPP tonight unless you put up like 360 fantasy points, and like, what the hell is an 18 fantasy point game going to do for me? Probably not jack shit. So it's very unlikely that I end up with anybody who projects under 20 fantasy points, even if they rate as a pretty decent T-Val. So, like, if I sort by T-Val, I don't know, Torian Prince is pretty thin at 20 fantasy points. DeAnthony Melton, pretty thin. Mike Muscala, pretty thin. David Mwaba. There's plenty of guys here where I'm probably going to end up with a lot of guys in the mid-range. And like, if I go over to here and I go over to this tab, the value and leverage viz, which is another tab that's in the range of outcomes, you can see that this 6K, 7K range, this is a really good range to be in. Like, you can live in this range. There's a lot of guys that look like they have some pretty good tournament winning upside here. 8K even has a couple guys with a 20% T-Val. 9K, a lot of guys here. 10K, a lot of guys here, but not really that much in this 3K to 4K range. There's just this one guy, Daniel Theis, who ends up being a really, really good play. So I'm probably going to end up with some pretty balanced builds. I don't think that I'm going to be able to afford too many of the studs. Let's really quick go through each price range and kind of like talk about the players that are in these price ranges. It is typically sorted by top finish percentage. So if you have not looked through these tabs, this is just measuring all the players that are priced between 3K and 4K, and then 4K and 5K, and then comparing them against each other. So Torian Prince looks like the best play in this range, but he only has a projection of 20.77, right? He has a top finish percentage of 76%. And his ownership is kind of low, honestly, only 5%. D'Anthony Melton is getting the most ownership in this range. Makes him a pretty bad play. It makes Torian Prince a much better play. Makes Kem Birch a better play. Makes David Nwaba a better play. Like, these guys are going to be lower owned. If you're going to be playing in this range, you pretty much just shouldn't play D'Anthony Melton. Like, if you need anybody in this 3K to 4K range, there's no reason to play him, considering he projects basically the exact same as all of these guys, and all of these guys are going to be less than 5% owned in GPPs. So it's a terrible play to play D'Anthony Melton today if you end up in this range, this 3K to 4K range. Looking at the 4K to 5K, the best play is Daniel Teese. He's also going to be the highest owned, so that's the best play there. Austin Rivers looks like the worst play, negative 14% LevX. He just doesn't have a chance to really be that good of a play. He does project for 20.45, but at 14% ownership, like, why would you play him over Jay Crowder? Or why would you play him over Jeff Teague? Why would you play him over Reggie Bullock even? Like, they're pretty much the same projections there. So there's really no reason to play Austin Rivers in this 4K to 5K range. The best play is going to be Daniel Theis. He gets there very, very often. Don't forget that Daniel Theis is the best value on the day, but still only reaches his tournament value 50% of the time. So it's not like you have to play him by any means. Let's see. Moving on to this 5K to 6K range. Best play is Joe Harris, but it's very, very close next to Cole Anthony. Joe Harris has a 48% chance to finish as the top overall player in this range, and then Cole Anthony is sitting at 38%. They both project for 30 fantasy points, but Cole Anthony is going to be 30% owned. Joe Harris is going to be 18% owned. So pretty easy decision to play Joe Harris there. And I should preface that I am saying all of this in assuming that you have a competitive lineup already built and you're looking to pivot. That's mostly what I use these salary range sheets for. If I have a very, very chalky lineup, if I build the chalkiest possible lineup, and I have all of the pieces that everybody else is going to have, and then I just want to enter a single entry somewhere, then I can go into these and I can look at who is going to be a better play than Cole Anthony, who's going to be a better play than Austin Rivers, and then make that one swap over to another player so that I have a lineup that is unique and gives me enough relative points to actually do well in GPPs. But Joe Harris, if you already have plenty of ownership, he's a better play than Cole Anthony. They both project the same. Joe Harris is going to be lower ownership. You could also play somebody like OG Anunoby at 5,800 who projects for 28. Michael Bridges, 3% ownership, projects for 28. These guys all make as much sense as Cole Anthony. They all have pretty good projections for the most part, and they're not going to be nearly as high owned. So if you need a pivot away from Cole Anthony, go into this range. Joe Harris is a good play. OG Anunoby is a good play as well. Moving over into the 6K to 7K range, let's see. There's not really going to be much ownership here. Jared Allen projected at 13% ownership, and Marcus Smart projected at 11% ownership. You don't really have to worry about getting away from any of the ownership here. You can play whoever you really want in this range without having to worry about any of that kind of stuff. The one thing that I will say is that when you're getting into this kind of a price point, you do kind of have to start worrying about the negative correlations that players have with each other. So if you are playing, let's see, if you're playing Julius Randle, you probably don't want to pair him with Elfrid Payton. Because Julius Randle, his upside has been unlocked almost entirely by being a ball handler this year. So I think that it's going to be a situation where I wouldn't want to play Elfrid Payton and Julius Randle together because they both need to have ball handling duties in order to find their ceilings. So I'd probably worry about something like that as an example. I probably wouldn't want to play Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield together. That doesn't sound like something that unlocks the upside for both of them, since they both depend so heavily on scoring points that they would eat into each other's ceilings. So you want to avoid stuff like that. But 6K to 7K range, play whoever you want. There are really no wrong answers here, so long as you're playing somebody who has a good projection. Jumping into this 7K to 8K range. Zion Williamson looking like a really, really good play. 64% chance to be the top finisher in the 7 to 8K range. Only projected for like 10% ownership. His T-val is really, really high, sitting at 41% at 7,900. So this is a really good matchup for power forwards, going up against like in this kind of a spot where you get this big of a defensive boost. It's going to be something where Zion Williamson, we know, has like 50 plus fantasy point upside. He's projected for 45 at 7,900. So probably somebody that I'm going to have quite a bit of exposure to. It should note that Karis LeVert is in this price range and is projected at 49% and looks like a very, very bad play in this range. Like, of everybody in this range, like, you might as well play Rudy Gobert. You might as well play Donovan Mitchell. You might as well play Christian Wood, DeAndre Ayton. Like, all of these guys basically project better than Karis LeVert, who's getting at 50% ownership. Thoughts on adding Levex count in ranges for positions? What do you mean by that? Zion slightly underpriced and significantly underowned? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to have like a lot of Zion Williamson. Oh, yeah. Kyle Lowry listed out Friday. Andrew Wiggins questionable. Jeff Teague available to play. Okay, cool. So, I mean, with Kyle Lowry out, then it kind of makes Fred VanVleet, not Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, one of the better plays on the slate. Let's go take a look really quick. We'll go isolate out Toronto. Yeah, Fred VanVleet is going to get a pretty big boost there. At 8K without any Kyle Lowry, I'm going to guess that when I rerun projections, he's going to be at like 46, projection of like 45, 46. So he's going to be underpriced. Norman Powell is going to get a really big jump in his ownership and in his projection. So at 3,900, Norman Powell is going to look like a really, really good play too. Pascal Siakam should get a bit of a boost as well. But it's mostly the guards that are going to jump up. So I'm guessing that Fred VanVleet and Norman Powell are both going to be phenomenal plays at this point. I love the one for salary. It would be cool to see the positions pivot. Okay, so I've actually had a couple questions on that. The reason why I don't do that is because the positions don't really matter in NBA. Like, what matters so much more is the salary that you're paying for players and how much you're able to actually fit. So the salary, like, your roster construction is not dictated by the players' positions that you're using. It's dictated by the salary of the players that you're using. So that's why I have it built in as salary. That being said, I am working on a way to turn this all into a web app, of which you would be able to choose if you want to look at it based on price range or based on position. So I'm working on that. But for now, I think that this is a much more usable way. Like, this is a much more applicable way of looking at things. How to write with FEV? Yeah, I always question myself, man. I always question myself. So, okay, yeah, it's going to be Fred VanVleet and Norman Powell. Those guys are going to be, like, real good plays. Let's move on to this 8K to 9K range really quick. Take a look at this, and then we'll finish up with some of the studs, and we'll get out of here so we can go rerun the models and build some lineups. So Chris Middleton looking like the best play, 52% chance finishes the top overall, but only projected at 40. Brandon Ingram is at 39, Fred VanVleet 39, Zach LaVine 39. So Fred VanVleet is going to end up being like the top dog in this range, almost for sure. Like for sure. Ownership is pretty spread out right now, but Fred VanVleet is going to be like 30% owned, I think. And it's going to be deserved. Like, he should be 30% owned. But it's going to drop the ownership of Brandon Ingram by a significant amount. It's going to drop the ownership of Zach LaVine by a significant amount, I think. Devin Booker is going to be nothing owned. So there's reasons to kind of look at these other guys, I think, in this price range. Especially Chris Middleton. He has a really good chance to be the top overall scorer. And then he's going to be like nothing owned. So this is an interesting range once we figure out the Fred VanVleet situation. Thanks for hanging out, tribe. Talk to you in the Discord here in a little while. So this 9K to 10K range, top of the charts is Julius Randle and then Jason Tatum and then Nikola Vucevic. And those are kind of like the three guys who actually have a chance to be the top overall scorers here. The ownership doesn't really reflect that. Julius Randle is only projected at 9% owned, whereas Jason Tatum is projected at 20%. So you can probably get some leverage on the field just by using Julius Randle. Nikola Vucevic has a higher T-val than Jason Tatum and is cheaper, is projected better, and has lower ownership. So Vucevic looks like some pretty good leverage on the rest of the slate. It really just depends on if you're playing Jason Tatum. And Jason Tatum is not a bad play by any means. No, Mavericks player tests positive for COVID-19. 2 players quarantined due to contact tracing. Mo Harkless is playing. Darius Garland out for Saturday. Colin Sexton questionable. Jordan Poole now probable for Friday. Okay. All right. Let's finish this up. 10K range. James Harden, 91% chance to finish as the top overall scorer. I understand that he has not looked great, but keep in mind that it is still James Harden. He's still putting up a lot of volume. He's still the best pure scorer in the league. And I think that he is going to get things back on track. And you're going to get him at nothing ownership. Like, he's going to be very, very low owned as the most expensive player on the slate. And only 7% owned, 40% T-val. I have him as a phenomenal play today. I'm probably going to force him up quite a bit. Russell Westbrook I have as a terrible play. Giannis I have as a terrible play. And then Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Anthony Davis all project okay but not incredible. So the best play in this range for me is going to be James Harden. I don't mind going Steph Curry. I don't mind going Anthony Davis. But Russell Westbrook and Giannis are kind of like off the table for me, I think. The projections are just really, really bad. The matchups are just really, really bad for them. And I like James Harden quite a bit more. So all of that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hopefully we can figure out a little bit better of a format on this. We'll talk about Vegas first. Maybe I'll put together a team-based ranking thing for teams that we should be focusing on. I don't know. Leave me some comments. Go hit me up on Twitter at Pater_DFS and let me know what you guys would like to see in this NBA stream. I'm going to be doing one every Friday. If you are not already a subscriber over at pater.ghost.io, go subscribe. The NBA models have been really, really hot for the last week, getting things going. The adjustment period is over, and I'm really excited for the rest of the sports to start back up with League of Legends and Counter-Strike. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you have any questions, hit me up. Always happy to answer them. I'm going to get out of here, go refresh models, and get ready for this night. See you later, guys.